Ladies and gentlemen, it's wonderful to see a full room. And Madam Commissioner, a great pleasure to be able to welcome you here to the Institute of International and European Affairs. Picking up a thread from what was just said, and I don't want to go back to talk about myself, but my great obsession after the collapse of the Berlin Wall was a focus on enlargement. And I believed then, and I believe now, that enlargement has been one of the great successes of European Union policy. And there is no state that joined, there is one unhappily that joined and then decided to leave, but there is no state that joined that didn't find considerable opportunity and prosperity. And Madam Commissioner, you are visiting one of those states. Back in the day before we joined, this state was the poorest state region of the then European Economic Community. And so, given that enthusiasm and given the agenda that you're now dealing with, and the fact that enlargement has been removed from the deep freeze in which it was placed for several years and is back on the agenda, I think it would be very interesting to have two opening appreciations from you. One, you're here, of course, on the eve of an Irish presidency, and the presidencies take the process that is European Union regulation and policy making, and does its best to close out some things and open others. So what are your hopes and expectations for the 6 months of the Irish presidency to do with the dossier that you have the privilege to lead?
I hope that the Irish spirit from 2004 will follow us also in the next 6 months, meaning that under your presidency, my country, Slovenia, and 9 others, and you were awarded for this, thank you for helping us to become a member of the EU. Under the Irish presidency, the Big Bang happened. But later on, we have had smaller enlargement processes or enlargements, 2007, 2013. But later on, the enlargement was not the priority anymore, especially for the Western Balkans, and we are paying the price for this today, for these mistakes. We have not been able to include the countries from the Western Balkans into the European Union. Why is this so important? Today, when I speak about the enlargement, we have some new elements we have never before. The first element is that we, for the first time, are negotiating with a country which is at war. Never before, Ukraine. For the first time, we have adversaries who would like to see us fail. And Europe is being under pressures from the east and from the west. And we are experiencing that Russia and its proxies are spending hundreds of millions of euros to stop the European paths of our candidate countries like we had in Moldova. But the main target, it is us. So it is the process where the more successful we get in the enlargement process, the more somebody is getting nervous. And I think that this pressure has not been there anymore. And for me, enlargement today is really much more than just the enlargement. It is how do we answer to the geopolitical situation today where Europe is under pressure and where we have a kind of two different systems, how we want to see the world. And then I will come back to the presidency. The conflict in Ukraine, between Ukraine and Russia, didn't start with the war in 2022. It started when Ukraine in 2014 decided to sign the free trade agreement, association agreement. Meaning, as long as Putin was able to control the leaders in Ukraine, it was okay. When Ukraine decided to go its way, then he started to push back. Now, the Irish presidency has a historical opportunity to be the most successful presidency after 2004 Big Bang.
Good.
Yes. And I count on you. First, this is the psychological element. We need fresh air. We need a lot of positive energy. We need your humor. And we need to show the world how good Europe is. I was speaking to Taoiseach before this session, and I really asked him, please help me, and you first, speak positively about the European Union and somehow infect the others that they will do this too. The other part is we can close all the chapters with Montenegro, 19.
Close all?
Yes.
Excellent.
Until the end of the year. But we will have to work hard, and we are ready to work hard. Meaning, you know, in the time of the last European Commission, we have been more successful in the enlargement process than in the previous 15 years.
Correct.
It's not because of me. I hope I contribute to some extent, but it is the geopolitical situation. It is the willingness also of the member states to move on. And there is another issue which is also a novelty in the enlargement process, namely that when we enlarge our European Union, we make our Europe safer and more secure.
So let me ask you, you mentioned one specific expectation, let us say, that the chapters will close for Montenegro. How long would it take then to produce an accession treaty and open the door and bring them in?
Yeah, you know, Montenegro has a vision 28 by 28. So because UK went out, we have the place 28. So we are filling again this spot. So 28th member of the EU in 2028. And we support this vision, and it is possible. Meaning if we close the negotiations until the end of the year, beginning of next year, then in 27 we could have the accession treaty and then the ratification process. So everything is planned.
So you're now 18 months into your mandate. You've 3.5 years in that mandate still to go. What is your sense? I'm not asking for expectation, things can come and go. What is your aspiration for those 3.5 years beyond Montenegro and the degree of progress, staying for the moment in Western Balkans?
You know, I have the experience to being outside the European, to live outside the European Union and to live inside the European Union. And I know what's the difference. That's why, you know, even if being a commissioner, of course, is a special work, but my personal mission is also to enable the others to become a part of this great community. I grew up in the communist system. It was not that bad in Yugoslavia, you know, that as behind the Iron Curtain, but still, what Europe has brought to us is really so valuable in the economic development, in democratic development, in good neighborly relations. So I think that if we manage to bring in Montenegro, if we manage to also close the negotiations with Albania at the end of 28, if the citizens of Iceland will say yes at the end of August to come back to the accession process, if Moldova will deliver, do we have somebody from Moldova? If Moldova will deliver as it is delivering today, can you imagine how much of success we could have? And this could be done until the end of my mandate, which is December the 1st, 29.
Well, thank you for that perspective. It gives some sense of the nature, the scale and the territory of the ambition. Since you shifted to Iceland, which has of course had, you know, an on-again, off-again relationship over many years with the Union, let me also bring in Norway, which may be having fresh thoughts on the same basis. I know already from work I've done with DG Move in Brussels that the Norwegian Transport Ministry would like to be associated from day one with EMERS, with this emerging regulation on military mobility, which seems to me to be perfectly logical because on a west-east corridor, they're a vital part of any logistical flow. And I know that there's a wider debate emerging also in Norway. What is your sense of what I might call that Nordic space and that Atlantic space in terms of possibly opening negotiations and what the rate of progress might be? Because they're in the EEA and they already have a lot of the acquis.
Yeah. Indeed, you know, there is a special place for the countries which are already so much connected to us, like Norway, Iceland, even Switzerland, being a part of Schengen and partially of the common market. The citizens of Norway will decide what kind of future they want to see. But if Iceland will come back and later become a member of the EU, in my opinion, this could have a positive motivation for Norway too. But for Europe, it is important today. There are countries who will never be able to become a member of the EU or who will never want to become a member of the EU, but we need partnership with them. Mm-hmm. And what we are now developing also with the UK. We have special partnerships, and for instance, in Ukraine facility or regarding Ukraine, UK, Norway, some other non-EU members are really helping a lot. So we have to see these relationships with the fresh eyes.
So let me ask you about fresh eyes. I want to come to Ukraine and Moldova, so we will get there. But taking Iceland and Norway, the big no when they had referenda was fish. And you've talked correctly about changed geopolitics. So will there be any change in the negotiating posture of the European Union to have fish get in the way of geopolitics? Or will there be any trade-off? It seems to me probably the critical psychological political issue to do with a yes or no disposition in both of those places.
It will be in the hands of the member states how they will deal with the fishes and other open issues. But you have said a decisive point. What will be the relation between the geopolitical need of also having special relation with Iceland or having Iceland as a member of the EU, and on the other hand, the certain concerns or issues connected to specific countries. We have proven in the past that, for instance, even with Switzerland, we have been able to establish a new agreement, so-called bilateral 3. I hope that they will vote positively in the referendum. So we have shown the readiness from the side of the EU to make agreements which are of benefits of both sides, and I hope that this will happen for Iceland too.
So let me come, if I can, to one of the states you mentioned in your aspirations for your own period of office, potential with Moldova. I think, given the nature of Russian aggression, given the renewed speeches about rescuing co-ethnics from oppression, given the state of Transnistria, which is a raw space that's exploitable by the Kremlin, it seems to me there is an urgency about embracing Moldova. As you remarked earlier, you had the staggering interference. I mean, there were 300 Orthodox clerics brought over to Moscow for tutoring on what to say in Orthodox churches before the last election and so on. And a lot of the Moldovan diaspora who voted outside Moldova actually carried the day for President Sandu. What can we do to genuinely accelerate that, which is a very, very good signal on wrestling with the hard geopolitics?
You have mentioned the Orthodox Church. Before I answer your question, I have visited last week when I was in Moldova, the Orthodox monastery of Santa Marta and Maria, and they told me that they are praying for me as commissioner and also for the idea of the European Union, and I carry this with me. It's important because Orthodox Church in Moldova is one of the most trusted institutions in the country, and we have to get involved also there. Speaking about Moldova, indeed, this is the country which is the poorest of our candidate countries, but where the motivation becoming a member of the EU is really so strong. They have suffered in the past that their leaders didn't want to go the European path. And now with Maia Sandu, we have had elections and referendums for 5 times where the European path has been confirmed. But not that just Moldova is being attacked from the outside. There are also many pro-Russian forces who are inside the country and who would, because of their personal interest, would like to see that the country would go the Russian way. What we have learned in Moldova, and that's why we should also even more support, is that at the last parliamentary elections last September, they have proven that they already have strong democratic institutions. functioning judiciary, independent media, and this is what we need for the country to be able to go on. Geopolitically, Russia has no direct contact, territorial contact to the country. But yes, Transnistria is an autonomous region, but there are changes happening there on the way. 10 years back, 100% of the trade from Transnistria was with Russia. Today, it is 80% with the European Union. More 10,000 of people in Transnistria are having Moldovan healthcare system, which is much, much better than it is in Transnistria. And they are coming to work. So the economic convergence will happen somehow naturally. What, of course, we have to consider is the danger of how Putin could react once he will really recognize that there is no way back for Moldova on the way to become a member.
Yeah, I've seen some of the more bellicose statements from Lavrov around the Transnistrian issue recently. Let me move, if I can, of course, to the biggest territory and the most complex challenge, which is that of Ukraine. We don't know at what point there will be a ceasefire. We don't know at what terms and conditions. We don't know precisely what the territorial boundaries will be. What we do know is the staggering admiration we have for the courage of the Ukrainians. And what we do know is the extraordinary capacity, resilience that they've shown, both in civil society and in their stressed but excellent military. And their technological innovation has turned what was allegedly the second army in the world at one time into the second best army in Ukraine, meaning they're now really handling the Russians on the military front. Commissioner Kubilius recently, talking about the necessity for a European Defence Union, said clearly in more than one speech, it would be a mistake not to have Ukraine involved in a European Defence Union in whatever structure and form it might take from the very beginning, because they have more to give than anyone else would have. So on that aspect, we can develop it beyond that. On that aspect, what I call the Kubilius perspective, what is your view?
There are two direct consequences of war in Ukraine on what we do in the European Union. The first consequence is that enlargement has again become a priority. And second is that we are dealing much more with the security issue inside the European Union as before. You know that we have no common security and defense policy inside the European Union, but there is a clear expectation from our citizens that we do more on this area. 80% of the citizens of the European Union countries expect from us this, and also interesting, 70% of the citizens are feeling threatened by Russia. Mm-hmm. It's different in different countries. So I agree with Commissioner Kubilius that it would be very clever to have a special, sometimes I call this defense Schengen, mm-hmm. A special security institution in which form ever, to work really strongly together, those European countries who want to do this, together with Ukraine. For instance, Schengen is a great system where we also have the third countries, like Norway, Iceland, even Switzerland. Mm-hmm. They can participate, for instance, at the council. They have no right to make the decisions. Mm. Meaning, if we consider that enlargement process will stay merit-based and Ukraine will need some years to do everything what needs to be done to become a full member of the European Union, where we could do or use the principle of the gradual integration is exactly security area where Ukraine is very strong. And this is the discussion which is now going on among the leaders of the European Union. when we think what we could do better in the accession methodology is exactly the area of the gradual integration, which we know, yes, quite a lot.
Indeed, I want to come to that because it's the natural outgrowth, the defence, security, Schengen, whatever it might be called, is one dimension. In that context, I suppose something that is, of exceptional importance that I found personally very uplifting and was texting friends in Budapest on the night was the defeat of Orbán and the arrival of Magyar. That signals not just a change of government, but a change of regime back to democracy. And it opens the door in a way that was shut firmly by the Kremlin-friendly disposition of Orbán and his foreign minister. With this new possibility, with wind in this sail, what could the Irish presidency do and at what pace to push the opening of chapters and the maturing of that engagement?
I wasn't finishing before what everything Irish presidency could do. So besides Montenegro and Albania closing the chapters, we will open, I think in half an hour we will know if Ukraine will deliver a revised action plan on minorities until 12 o'clock. And then for sure we will know if we will open.
That will be the Hungarian lifting of the...
Yes, so Hungary has lifted or has given a green light now, the procedures. So I really hope this will happen. So then we will be able to open finally, cluster 1 for Ukraine and Moldova on Monday. But then we still have 5 clusters.
Of course.
And my vision is that we will open all those clusters, 5 for Moldova and Ukraine on July 14, and this will be during the Irish presidency. Some would say, come on, Marta, this is only opening the clusters. The real thing is when you start closing the chapters.
I think that's probably unprecedented. I don't think all the clusters have ever been opened at one time for any state that ever joined the Union.
Thank you for mentioning this, Pat. Yeah, that's why we should celebrate this. This is not something we see just like this. So it is months and months of hard work and front-loading processes we have had because of Hungary was blocking this. So it is huge what we can achieve. And from the psychological point of view, it's important. Meaning, it's technical, it can be complicated, but you can't go on without opening the clusters. This is why I will for sure celebrate on Monday in Luxembourg.
Super.
And later on the 14th of July.
So the reason I picked up this piece of paper, because I don't want to leave anything out, but Chancellor Friedrich Merz suggested that there should be an acceleration process for Ukraine. You've already answered Merz 1. There are 6 points he had. The first one was open all chapters. We can tick that, not close them, but open them. Secondly, he suggested that Ukraine should be present in all institutions to be able to influence, but not to be able to vote. When I was president of the European Parliament, it was my great determination and privilege to set a precedent of inviting deputies from all of the parliaments of the then candidate states to attend the committees and plenary sessions of the European Parliament with a right to speak on committees, no right to vote, and a right to attend in plenary. The purpose also was to make the Parliament prepared. I want to come back to how we prepared as Europeans later. But Merz's second point is open the institutional doors. What's your view on that?
You want me to speak as a commissioner or as Marta?
Well, as the commissioner, you're constrained. So, like the good swimmer you are, jump in on the deep end of this pool and just go ahead.
But I have to constrain myself because I'm so excited what is happening now in the enlargement process or in my portfolio. So the ideas of Chancellor Merz are positive because they have induced a discussion, and what we need now is a discussion among the member states. And we need the involvement of the leaders. Technically,
yes, of course,
we have proven with my team nearly everything is possible. But we have to consider that the accession process is happening in two paths. One is the technical, I'm responsible. The other one is political dynamics in the member states. So nearly everything is possible if member states will agree. So I hope that the member states will discuss all these ideas, how to include the representation of the candidate countries in the institutions before, but this will be really in their hands.
Thank you for that. I mean, it's encouraging. It may or may not happen. You don't own all the dynamics, but it's a clear view, and it's good to know. I would too. I'll go to the last point on Mertz's list of 6, which has come up now. I think 5 or 6 member states have written to, perhaps to you, to the President of the Commission and President of Council, expressing an anxiety to do with democracy and fundamental rights and so on, given the backsliding that we had to live with and the constraints that it imposed, that there should be Mertz called it a snapback procedure for backsliders. Do you think this innovation is likely to be introduced to future accession treaties, which in effect, since they need to be ratified by all member states, would set a new boundary in law, learning from the limitations of the ability to address those who fail to give the necessary cooperation and loyalty?
We are now preparing the accession treaty for Montenegro, and this will be a blueprint for all the next accession treaties, with a special part on the safeguards, which is nothing new. We have always had safeguards and transitional periods in the accession treaties, but this time, I agree with Chancellor Merz, there will be some special safeguards. Namely, how can we make sure that the newcomers, new member states, will obey the rules which are inside the EU also after 5, 10 or 15 years becoming a member? Our union is built on trust among the member states, also on the trust in the institutions in the member states that they will always stick to the rules and the principles on what we are built on, especially on the Article 2 of the European Treaty. But we also have the experience that this is not so, if we go back to Hungary. And, you know, even if I am Commissioner for Enlargement and I really push the candidates to deliver, my task is also to take care about the concerns of the member states or as a European Union as a whole, meaning that we have to do everything possible to protect our European Union. You know, when I was mentioning a term, Trojan horses, for the first time in the interview for Financial Times in last November, so many people were criticizing me. What do I dare to say? My statement has been that we have to do everything possible that we will not have Trojan horses inside the European Union. Now, they are repeating my words.
Of course, we saw what happened between the foreign ministry in Budapest and Moscow. They'd run out of council meetings and brief Moscow.
Yeah, so, you know, it would be imaginable 15 years back that some of the member states will look to the Moscow or be a servant to Moscow. But it happened. So how do we protect ourselves? We need those safeguards, but the main principle, and we are now discussing with the member states what kind of safeguards, but the main principle would be, if the new member states will follow or obey the rules which are in the European Union, they will not even notice those safeguards. But if they will go against, the safeguards will bite hard. And this will be the main principle.
So thank you for clarifying that. I think that is a very significant and, from what we've learned, necessary innovation to do with the accession process. I want to turn, if I can now, to, since everything's connected to everything else, I don't want to get lost in the minutiae of the medium-term financial framework, but it is the financial purse that will cover all the ambitions. And while in money terms it looks much bigger than several years ago, adjusted for inflation, it's 0.02% larger than before in real terms. And I'm kind of asking myself the question, if we're ambitious to bring in a lot of states and in particular a large state, whatever the de facto boundaries, a large state like Ukraine. And I make this point not hostile to Ukraine, but observing it. Ukraine would be in its whole integrity territorially, and perhaps even with bits that could be missing de facto, the largest single territory ever to join the EU. In GDP terms, it is relatively more agricultural than the EU average. And in relative wealth and poverty, it would have the lowest GDP per capita in that space. And the way EU funds tend to flow, if you're big, more agricultural and poorer, they tend to flow in your direction for reasons of development and opportunity. But if budget ceiling that's tight, the risk is someone somewhere in some capital will figure if these guys come in with the kind of conditions we're used to, they will be eating our lunch, perhaps even our dinner. And so it's one of those pragmatic political issues about the capacity to actually do the job. And that's the theme I want to turn to. We're talking about the capacities and the needs of candidate states. Is the EU budget, as it's being actually fit for the task of a significantly enlarged union over the next decade? It will run, after all, for 7 years, probably until 2034 or 35.
The simple answer would be yes.
Maybe a slightly more complicated and nuanced version.
Yes, we are still in the discussion, but the discussion until now has shown that the member states, the parliament, they understand what kind of priority the enlargement process is. This is one point. The other point is that, yes, we know how this is functioning, but we have been able to accept 10 countries. One of them in 2004 has been Poland, also with a strong agriculture.
May I just interrupt? When I was president of the European Parliament, I attended the summit meeting in Copenhagen, December 2002, when that budget boundary was set. And there was an explicit engagement about adding more, recognizing the enlargement reality, and a lot of pushback. I don't want to go into the rows that were in the corridor, but something real happened there that pushed that boundary into the space appropriate to the scale of ambition. And just as I look at the MFF in real terms versus what went before, a 0.2 margin of real improvement is not zero, but it's closer to zero than lots of other possibilities.
Meaning that we'll have to work very carefully with the money we will have. And meaning, for me, it is not that much important how much money. Much more important is what do we get out from this money. And I'm sure we will make it. Also because even if Ukraine is big, Poland has gotten 20 years of transitional period
super growth
for the agriculture, meaning only from 2024 it's completely integrated in our common agriculture policy. Meaning, with Ukraine, we will see when we will start making the accession treaty. But what we know is how the whole process of enlargement connected to the prosperity is working. And Poland is one of really good examples. In 1991, GDP per capita in Ukraine has been higher than in Poland. Today, it is 5 times higher than in Ukraine, in Poland than in Ukraine. And this is the result of economic development of Poland. And this, this circle of how we can succeed in the accession process is, first, the countries have to deliver the reforms. The reforms are needed to build a kind of legal certainties that the private investors will come. We can't pay everything what needs to be done in the newcomers or the candidate countries only by the public money. We need private investors, but they will only come if their investments will be safe and if they will be able to earn the profit. The business of business is making business. So we have to do this. And once they will come, the prosperity will happen. And we will not be able, we can speak about the democratic development, we can speak about the geopolitical aspect. If we will not succeed to bring prosperity, more prosperity in the EU, when the newcomers come, then we will not succeed.
Well, we've never failed with any candidate state on that front, so one can be optimistic. I've one last question, and I want to turn to the audience briefly before you have to go. The institutional setup over the years, deepening, enlarging, is a very old debate. But if we add in all the countries that might come from Western Balkans and Moldova and Ukraine, and let us say Iceland and Norway, the European Commission, with one nominee per state, looks unwieldy. Now, there was a solution proposed in the Lisbon Treaty. There were certain sensitivities in our country about that. And President Sarkozy made a visit and found a kind of a workaround that the Council would have to make the choice to reduce the Commission and rotate commissioners by unanimity. And so, of course, nothing has happened since. And we thought Lisbon was so good, we voted twice. So in that context, my question is, what is your sense of the ability to cope? Do we need this more rationalized commission with an equality of treatment of member states, but not a constant presence? And on majority voting, they're big questions, but a short view. What's your sense of the need for Europe in its own preparation to receive these many new states, if they come, to be able to cope with decision making as we know it?
You really are asking me delicate questions, Pat. So, regarding the number of...
You may speak as Marta and not as the Commission.
Of course, and everybody will recognize that I was speaking as Marta. Now, based on the European Treaty, it is possible that we have only 2/3 of the numbers commissioners. So it is in the hands of the member states. Once we tried, we failed.
Yeah.
So if the member states will want to do this, it is possible. Until now, I only know for one candidate country which is explicitly saying that actually we don't need a commissioner, and this is Edi Rama from Albania. He said, for the first time, I don't.
Edi's successor might have a different view.
Yeah, well, we will see. Regarding the decision-making process, in the European Commission, we think, and me personally, as Marta too, that it will be good if we will go into qualified majority decision-making process when it's about the foreign and security policy. We have seen now with the case of Hungary that many articles of the European Treaty has been not followed. Especially the Article 4, we are not talking that much about this article, which speaks about the loyal or sincere cooperation.
Yes, exactly.
And we should really put more effort in this. Meaning, this example, Hungary has given Ukraine a candidate status, so it was unanimity decision. Then in between, they said, stop, we don't support Ukraine anymore. It cannot happen. Being a member of the EU is also the responsibility that you carry on the implementation of the commonly agreed issues.
Precisely.
So we should speak more about how do we behave once we are a member. It's not only about the candidates. We are demanding sometimes from the candidates much more than we are demanding from the member state. And sometimes we don't say even a word because you don't bash your own friend or member state. So,
look, Commissioner, I'm aware from your colleagues that you have a tight schedule. We have a fantastically literate audience. We don't have loads of time. I'm going to take 3 questions at the one time. And my guest, Commissioner, when you get to the end of that, you've probably exhausted your possibilities. Forgive me, I see one hand in the second row there. Can we get a microphone there? Just because there's only one hand up down there. Put your hands down for a moment and fall them back again. Yes, please.
Yeah, hello. Thank you for this inspirational talk. Yeah, you never mentioned Turkey, which is still a candidate country. Where do you place Turkey under your term of office? And do you think has a perspective for EU membership close for Turkey forever? Thank you.
Great question. We'll take a second question here. Let me take a lady there, hand up. Yeah, please. You. Yeah. Forgive me.
Hi, my name is Ilaria Giustacchini. I work at the TEPSA team in Brussels, and I'm a little bit fangirling because one of the things I do is manage our Invigorate EU project on EU enlargement with our scientific coordinator, Dr. Funda Tekin. So I follow your work a lot. So my question would be on civil society support. So of course, I know the Commission gives funds to civil society organization and a seat at the table at certain parts of the process. But there is sometimes a disconnect, especially, for example, in Serbia, between civil society organizations and the grassroots movements that actually bring forward the pro-EU sentiment and are putting their physical life in peril. And normally it's youth and it's students, whereas the CSOs tends to be old elite politicians that revolve through the doors. So my question is, what is the Commission doing, and what are you doing to identify this disconnect where it exists, and also how do you then support these movements where the disconnect exists, because maybe they don't access EU funds, they're not so structured, but they're actually the ones that are fighting for their future and fighting for the European project. Thank you.
Yes, please. Sorry. Forgive me, I know there's lots of questions, but it just...
Commissioner Kos, I met you in Sarajevo briefly, where I live and work at the moment. I wanted to ask you a question.
Beautiful city.
Thank you. My wife is from there. I'm Irish. And I wanted to ask you... Yeah, thank you. I wanted to ask you about MAGA and Trump influence in the region. So you know that Vucic very swiftly got out of the Kushner-Trump Tower in Belgrade. They arrested one of their own ministers. I'm surprised that Eddie Rama has been so clumsy about this, and it's definitely creating a problem for him of the kind he hasn't managed before, and he's been quite arrogant on CNN. But the most concerning one for me is that I heard from someone very close to the High Representative Schmidt that he had been removed by MAGA because he disapproved, as did Luigi, the head of the EU delegation there, of the gas pipeline, in which the contract was given for the pipeline to two lawyers who represented Trump on the 6th of January and who had no speck of previous experience in energy. And now they're talking about replacing the High Representative with a pro-Russian, pro-Serbian Italian versus a French person, which is supported by the French and the English, but not by the Germans. I think that who becomes the high rep is going to determine whether or not I think Europe is ready to fight for the institutional space in Bosnia, which is a laggard, but a bellwether for the entire region.
So thank you for that. Commissioner, we have three really easy ones. Turkey, the role of civil society, and the special rep in Sarajevo. And listening to the story about Trump's lawyers getting into the gas industry, we have a phrase here more about humor than seriousness. That's great gas, Commissioner. So I hand it over to you now to pick up those points.
Turkey, indeed, it is a candidate country, but since 2019, we don't do anything on this accession path. But the truth is that Turkey is too important to be left on the side. So we are now, in my opinion, we should look into the EU-Turkey relations with the fresh eyes again, with the fresh eyes in the sense of that we can work together in many aspects. I'm also responsible for the connectivity agenda, how to connect Europe better with the Central Asia through Armenia and Azerbaijan. We can't do this without Turkey. The other part is economic interest. Last year, we made through 230 billion euro trade between EU and Turkey. This is more than twice as much as with all Mercosur countries together. So there is a clear interest of the European companies that we do something, especially on the field of the customs union. And we will see if we can have some small steps how to modernize this. And of course, we shouldn't forget that Turkey has the second strongest NATO is the army, and we need security in Europe. So I'm traveling to Turkey very soon to discuss all these issues. The civil society support, this is my favorite because I think that we cannot have the enlargement process without the civil society organizations. But not every civil society organization is contributing to the success of the enlargement. We have many gangos which the governments are establishing to work against us. So what I want to see, we have increased the money, and we will, with in the new MFF, having even more. As you know, we have for the first time civil society organization strategy on the level of the European Commission. What I want in the new MFF is that we see what are our priorities, which civil society organizations can support us in this. If we don't have them yet, we will help to build them, and then we have to measure what they have done. I don't want just to finance the civil society organizations for which I don't know what kind of impact they have. And they can have a great impact. Really, I'm so happy. We are supporting civil society organizations. You know, Belarus is in my portfolio. In Belarus, in Russia, outside Russia, for Russia. We are supporting them in Azerbaijan and so on. So there will be more money. We can't do this. It is true that some of the leaders don't want them to be a part of the accession process because they play the role of the watchdog. So they are telling us what the government is not doing well. But this will remain. We need this kind of watchdog.
One of the great strengths of Ukraine and the big difference, civil society is real and really active.
You know, thank you for mentioning this, Pat. Whenever I'm there, so in every mission I meet them, and we are having open discussion because especially Ukraine, they have really the strongest civil society, knowing really very well what's going on in the country. And this is the mission, the meeting, I really have to be very well prepared what is going on.
I'm pleased to hear you're talking about financing, you know, what we call positive civil society. US aid decimated so much of Ukrainian civil society after Elon Musk, and we need to step in.
I agree with you. We stepped in, for instance, when we stopped the payments for the government in Georgia, just for the government, for the civil society with CIPEL, we have put some money into the civil society organizations, and we are also helping not Radio Free Europe as the institution, but to the journalists who are delivering program in the languages which are important for our candidate country.
So MAGA and Sarajevo.
Yes.
And everywhere else, perhaps.
Indeed, you know, we know the numbers that MAGA is investing $1.8 billion in Europe to not exactly help us, if I'm very mild. So this is the money which tends to be spent to persuade the world that, I'm using their words, that European civilization is in a decline, that our economy is in decline, and that our democracy is in decline, which of course is not the truth.
They should look in the mirror.
Yes, and we should be aware, we should really not take this easy, because, you know, they have unlimited amounts of money, and they want to harm us, Europe, and we shouldn't let this. And of course, Mr. Day it can be in Bosnia and Herzegovina. It was happening in Hungary. You know, the biggest island of MAGA in Europe has been in Ireland. It is very strong also in Russia. So we are now monitoring in the European Commission what kind of disinformation is coming and where from. And there is a lot of disinformation or fake news, which we have to fight more. And what is happening in Bosnia and Herzegovina, there are, you know, first we have to clear the facts, but secondly, in my opinion, the next HR should be he or she who will work so good that in 2 years it will cancel the office, so that we will not diss him or her anymore. And I hope that we will find agreement among the EU member states whom we want to see there. But this is really, when I speak about not just MAGA, we have to be more alert who wants to harm our democracies. We have in November adopted the first strategy ever on the level of the EU. It's called Democracy Shield, how to protect our democracies. Ladies and gentlemen, if you would have told me 15 years back, or you, Pat, that we need something like this, I would tell you that you are crazy. Who needs this kind of strategy? Because our democracies are strong. Now I'm one of the biggest supporters of this strategy. If we will not proactively protect our democracies, I don't know what will happen. We have clearly interferences in the election processes, not just in our candidates like Moldova, but also in the member states. So high alert, we have to counter all this disinformation. And the last message is, this modern language, debunking is not enough. So it's not enough that we wait what they say and we say differently. We have to do the pre-bunking, so we have to tell our story, which is not sometimes easy.
Commissioner, this has been absolutely a wonderful hour. My apologies to colleagues here who had questions. You have to come back.
I will.
On behalf of the Institute, I want to thank you. You have spoken about the threats that come from the outside. There was a wonderful word invented by the Munich Security Conference report in 2020 about some of this happening on the inside. They called it Westlessness.
Westlessness.
And about some of the internal dynamics that we need to address on protecting democracy. A very last observation, Commissioner. I'm thrilled to be able not just to witness, but to feel your enthusiasm for the dossier that you have the privilege to lead. I'm thrilled to see that enlargement is back on the agenda.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
I'm reminded to finish of some words of Jean Monnet. He was asked back in the day, Monsieur Monnet, vous êtes optimiste ou pessimiste? And his answer was, je ne suis pas optimiste. Je ne suis pas pessimiste. Je suis déterminé. I'm pleased to see you are déterminé also.